X93.5. This disclaimer is a statement notifying the listening audience that the opinions expressed on any public affairs show do not reflect those of KX935, its management, or the board of directors.
I am a modern version of those that have existed in every culture. I am a guide. I take a small group of strangers on a journey of spiritual and personal growth with indigenous cultures in exotic places, only to introduce them to themselves. It can be terrifying to look at our fears, and sometimes even more so to look at our strengths. I take you out into the wild, into the unknown, for an inner journey. Hi, this is Inner Journey, and I'm your host, Greg Friedman, sex, relationships, dream interpretation, or personal growth. I help by taking the wisdom of indigenous cultures and making it work for you here and now. I'm a modern version of that which has existed in every culture. A guide, a mentor, a life coach. I've studied and done ceremony with Peruvian shaman, Aborigine elders, and elders from various Native American tribes, including the Yaqui, the Lakota, and the Abenaki. The success of this show relies completely on you, the listener. Call in, ask about those things that have been nagging you and you've got no place to go. The number here is area code 949-715-5936. That's 949-715-5936. So you call in, I offer up input. Why should you do what I suggest? Well, don't. All I'm asking is that you check it out. It feels appropriate, try it on. If it fits, wear it. If it doesn't, throw it back on the shelf. No loss. Tonight, I'm going to talk about one of those things that you've heard me talk about a number of times before. There are few rites of passage in our culture. I've said it before, and you're going to most likely hear it again from me. There are very few rites of passage. We've created a culture of lost boys and girls that are greatly inhibited from becoming men and women. There are few teachers. We're growing and getting more, but we need more teachers, mentors, and guides. And as a result, there are many lost that pass their lost ways along to others, to the next generation. Pervy, juvenile, giggling, tee-heeing, lewd, lascivious. Words that I would use to describe how much of Western culture approaches sexuality. This is the way we look at it. Sex, sensuality, and love is not dirty. It's not bad or to be seen peeking through a keyhole. Today, we have men and women addicted to internet porn versus making an intimate, true connection. We have women and men excited and titillated by what Miley Cyrus or the Kardashians are doing. If we are divine, and we are, since we're divine, it's important to understand that all we do is make love. That everything divine is an expression of love. And that every expression of love is in turn divine. And that it's appropriate that we grow into expressions of love through our breath, our movement, our thought. And that love, physical, spiritual, or mental, is not like an octopus that wraps around us and devours. It's something that is divine and available and uplifting. It does not respond to desperation. There is no shame. It doesn't have to happen in the dark. It's not something that obligates, but instead invites us to elevate as individuals, as humans. And I'm inviting all of us to dance in the light, to celebrate our lives in this form, in this body, through learning and sharing, all of us in a very happy, healthy way. Sex and sensuality is an expression of our humanity. It's a celebration of us being in this form on this planet. It's an expression of the divinity reflected in our minds, our bodies, our spirits. Sex is sometimes an expression of our physicality. Great. Sometimes it's employed by our mind for release, relaxation, rejuvenation, and stimulation. Okay. And sometimes sex is the domain of the heart, a connection of intimacy to ourselves, others, and the divine. And of course, my favorite is the combo platter. When our entire beings meet in Congress, it is divine. And as I often remind you, you are divine. You are sexual. Be creative. Enjoy. And this leads us directly into our guest tonight. Kerri Ryan is a priestess of the goddess. And the goddess tells us that our bodies are sacred vessels filled with the ability to transcend the realms of the physical and connect through the act of sex with divinity. The goddess of sacred sex invites us to open to the sacred in our lovemaking, to be aware that sex is a gateway that can connect us with the divine, to see our bodies as sacred vessels of immense power and love. And once again, our guest tonight is Kerri Ryan, a priestess of the goddess and sacred sexuality. She will help us understand all of this and much more. Welcome to Inner Journey, Kerri.
Greg, hi. I'm so happy to be here. I'm enjoying my interaction with you ever since you picked me up in the car, all the way here. The pre-chats before we came on air, I'm enjoying myself immensely already. Let's talk about sacred sex, hey?
Heck of an idea. Do you want to jump in, or would you like me to ask you something?
What you got?
Well, let's talk about what it is. What is sacred sexuality?
I know from an historical context how the mystery schools and religions and all philosophies from all different cultures have understood sacred sexuality to be something that was taught to adepts and those that were specifically trained to use this energy within a creative context. And that creative context was a transmutation of the energies of sexuality to create something bigger than that. I mean, our creation myths are all about the merging of physicality with spirituality. And how we do that is we engage through the acts of sexuality. So for me, bringing it back down into a much more physical human level, the acts of sex that are sacred are ones where we employ our heart, where we bring ourselves to the party, where we open ourselves and allow the aspects of us that are sacred to join with another. And in doing that, we open a gateway. And I think in that place, there's a lot of us who have sex which is pretty ordinary. It's a physical act, and we live our lives where we are continuing every time we have sex to leave it at this level. I'm just here to say there are so many more places to go with your sexual lovemaking than just the physical act.
So what is, by the way, in case anybody hasn't guessed to date, Kerri is from Brisbane, Australia, and we are very blessed to have her. It happened in one of those synchronicity ways, and we are very, very fortunate to have you all the way across from the other side of the world. So what does sacred sexuality look like in practical application? What if, I show up at the door, and what happens?
Look, I think most people are familiar with the term Tantra. and that seems to be a term that's bandied around very much now in Western culture. People are seeking to have an experience which is greater than just a physical joining of bodies. Tantra, coming from the Taoist and the Buddhist philosophies, isn't essentially about sexuality at all. It's actually spiritual practices which are holistically about taking the energies of the body into a divine place. Sexuality is one part of the bigger whole, and I think it's been something that Western culture has jumped upon as an easy way to filter out just this one bit. Because if you're going to be an adept as a tantric person who is studying the whole of the philosophy, then you actually need to commit a lot of time to it. But for those in the West who are looking to have a sexual experience which is based on spiritual practices, then Tantra is a great way that people are able to go and learn about basically starting to get in touch with their bodies. Mm-hmm. It's about knowing their bodies. It's about understanding that breath is a key that can allow you to open your energy centers, the chakras in your body. Breathing is an amazing way to not only still you and bring you present into your body, but to open you and connect you. And look, I haven't been trained in Tantra. That hasn't been an area that's really called out to me. My sexuality is inherently expressed within me, and it always has been. And I experience it as easily as I think any tantric person would, because I think I'm a natural tantric person.
But here's what I'm getting at.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody who is, say Danny shows up on the door.
Yeah.
And he says, I want to understand sacred sexuality, and you're a priestess of the goddess, so you can teach me. What would you do? How would you initiate him? How would you help him to understand sacred sexuality? Yeah.
To have a sense of the energetic body and the chakras in the body, we need to be able to connect to each other energetically. That's really what I see in a nutshell that sacred sexuality is about. You're connecting to your partner energetically. You're feeling into their body. You're feeling their energy field merging with your own. And that can be done through the auspices of breath and sharing energy between each other.
Okay. So you would begin with just teaching them how to breathe.
I would sit in front of him and I would invite him to feel the energy between us. And having already met Danny, I know that he's able to experience that. For somebody who's not able to, it can take a little while. But to breathe up into a chakra, breathing energy pranically up into your base chakra, you start to activate that chakra, and so it becomes alive, and it becomes able to be felt within your body. And so sitting opposite somebody, asking them to breathe into their base chakra, I would then breathe into my base chakra. And then I would share energy with Danny at that base chakra level, and I would ask him to breathe in as I was breathing out, and we would share energy backward and forward. And then what I would do was then move up to the sacral chakra, then up to the solar plexus, and then again up to the heart. And really, they're very easy things to accomplish. And if you are looking yourself to have a deeper connection with your partner, then just try being with each other. Try looking at each other, sitting opposite each other, looking into each other's eyes.
What a great thought. We have a caller. Catherine, you were calling in from Pasadena. Welcome to Inner Journey with Greg Friedman.
Oh, thank you so much for taking my call. I appreciate you both, Greg and Priestess.
Hi, Catherine.
So did you have a question for Kerri, myself, or both of us?
Well, both of you would be awesome. Thank you. I just want to say and ask, yesterday, a really close friend of mine who is a male actually called me and offered me a weekend of sacred sexuality together.
Take it.
And well, that's the thing. I appreciated his honesty, and we've known each other nearly half of our lives, but I'm in a space right now of celibacy, enjoying myself and the divine, taking up the energy in my womb space. So I respectfully declined. But, he's a young man, and he doesn't necessarily want to be in a committed relationship. So my question is, what does someone do who wants to have that exchange of chi, but not necessarily wants to be in a committed relationship?
Well, is that someone, you or him? Are you asking
for him? For him. For him.
Look, I believe that the level of intimacy that we have on a daily basis can so be enhanced. And, I mean, we can share sexual energy without having to touch each other. I mean, I've been doing that tonight with Greg and Danny here in the studio because we're sharing this energy which is innately within all of us, and it is a powerful energy, and we don't share it enough. It's like we've shut our sexual energy down, and so we walk around without this, and especially for women, the fluidity, the sensuality, the aspects that make us attractive women. And so my advice to you would be to share some sexual energy that doesn't necessarily have to involve physical sex. How do you feel about that?
That's something definitely I can do for sure.
It sounds like you already are a sensual, activated lady. Would that be right?
I guess so, yeah.
Now, there's another aspect of this that I'm hearing where there's some hesitation because you are not in a place where you're interested or able to go because of your own path into a physical aspect of this. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. So you are in your power, and part of being in your power means that you get to design this so it works for you. And if that works for him as well, groovy. And if it doesn't, then that's okay. Then you go your separate ways, and you find somebody that resonates or reflects back the energy that you are willing to share or interested in sharing. Because, as I said in my opening monologue, it's not like an octopus that wraps around you and obligates you. Instead, it's an elevating, uplifting, empowering thing that you get to do or not do by choice, not by feeling like, oh, he's my friend, I should do this, or I need to take care of him. He's perfectly capable as another powerful, empowered being to handle this for himself as well. You're under no obligation, and that makes you available to opportunity and choice.
Indeed.
Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You are quite welcome. Thank you very much for calling in to Inner Journey.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye. And we're going to take one more caller in a row, if you would. We have Gabe calling all the way from Taos, New Mexico. Hey, Gabe, are you there?
Hey, greetings. Yes, I am here. How are you all doing tonight?
We are excellent. Are you calling via Skype?
I'm calling from my computer. Is my reception kind of...
It's a little interesting. We're going to make it work to the best of our abilities. So
yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay. So I'll do my best to be clear then. So, I have a question regarding sacred sexuality that applies actually to people of all ages. Now, I consider myself to be a mentor of young people. And, considering that we live in a pretty over-sexualized, or rather mis-sexualized, I guess you could say, society, I'm kind of curious to know how we can begin teaching the principles of sacred sexuality to young people, and at what age do you kind of start, getting them comfortable with their bodies and with their true, sacred sexual natures without, crossing the lines of taboo and things like that.
Gabe, I would say that children are innately sexual. We are sexual beings through and through. There is no question about that. How we express sexually as children is natural. I'm not seeing really where the problem is until it comes into how we are projecting our thoughts about sexuality onto the children to start with. I mean, what is an appropriate age for children to be sexual? That is such a sliding scale now. And I see younger children more and more are having relations. So what you're saying is that you would like to be able to educate them from an earlier age about what sort of aspects of sacred sexuality are you talking about, other than affirming their sexuality is an innately an aspect of them?
Yeah, I'm talking initially just about at least introducing them to, what I guess the nature of sexual intimacy should be, because they're going to come across it. They obviously do come across it from the earliest ages of awareness now through media and so forth. And yeah, I guess I'm referring to at what age, not that they begin practicing, but at what age do we begin sharing with them awareness of the true depth of what relating to each other as human beings sexually looks like.
Okay, I'm going to jump in here for a second. First of all, there is no way that it should be. There is nobody dictating that this is the way, this is the right way, and everything else is the wrong way, or other things tend to be the wrong way. That's the first part. The second part is that there are rites of passage designed at specific age to open yourself up in different ways at different times. And the initiates go in with great guidance, care, and parenting. And their families are there to support them and introduce them in a way that's appropriate at the age that's appropriate. And there are different ages that are appropriate for different things. And what Kerri was saying, and that I agree with completely, is that we are all innately sexual beings. And more than anything, at a young age, what they need is not to be gunked up with other stuff and have anybody really driving it. Allowing them to discover it for themselves is absolutely a natural, innate part of our human experience. Now, beyond that, there are schools such as Kwadoshka training that will help initiate different places at different times of their lives. And that is not up to anybody else but the family to decide what the appropriate age and methodology to initiate is in Congress with the child, because the child is a strong, empowered being as well. And she gets to decide with her parents what's appropriate, not anybody else.
Got you. Yeah, that helps. Thank you very much.
You are quite welcome. Thank you very much for calling into Inner Journey.
Okay, folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, that was a fascinating call.
Interesting, yeah.
Do you have a little further input for that?
Well, I don't think really the ideas of sacred sexuality are really present for children, other than the naturalness of who they are. Mm-hmm. I think when we start to open up to our divinity, we're a little bit older, again, because kids are naturally all that is. They haven't yet been touched. But, I mean, our culture is so inculcating in terms of the way it teaches sexuality from such a young age. And perhaps Gabe is referring to how do we move that into a place that is more affirming for kids rather than what they're getting media-wise pushed at them at a young age.
It's possible. But not only at a young age, it's even today, as I said. So, we're titillated by what Miley Cyrus is wearing or not wearing, what the Kardashians are doing or not doing.
Yes.
So how, along those lines, as adults, how does sacred sexuality help us heal?
Well, it asks us to find the sacred within ourselves. And there is so much profane sexuality everywhere around us. It's forced at us from so many different angles every day, all the time. It has to be a choice, I believe, that we are reaching for something deeper, something bigger that requires looking at the aspects of ourselves which are not sacred and seeking a response which invites us to know ourselves more deeply, because the level that I see sexuality operating on is pretty damn shallow. And so we're not everybody's called to want to have a sacred experience. And I mean, we can have a sacred experience within any of our religious ideologies, whatever we are preferring. But when we're moving that energy, which I see as divine, which is normally connected with religion, when we're moving that from this space outside of ourselves and looking at our own bodies, our own spirit, and seeing them as divine, well, then we're playing a whole different ball game. And then when we're wanting to actually extend that into the realms of sexuality, we're told that that's not appropriate. Sexuality within our standard religion is a no-go area. We don't mix the two. It's incongruous, so to speak. So moving sexuality into the sacred is a personal journey that I think we embark on when we're ready for it.
But what I heard was the opening is to recognize those things that we need to have healed, to use sacred sexuality to help us heal.
I believe when we open up our bodies to experience sexuality, we have to clear out the blockages that are already in our bodies. And I spoke earlier about the chakras and things. When I started my journey some 20 odd years ago, I had to acknowledge the sexual, and let's say there is a lot of people who have sexual wounding. I specifically didn't have any sexual incest or anything happen to me, but I still had a body that was full of messages around sexuality, and they live in the chakras, they live in the energetic body.
Now, you were talking before about that. What were some of those messages that you brought into this work that you've really worked hard to heal in yourself?
Well, obviously we're told that sexuality, again, is something that is kept for marriage and within a relationship context, all of those things. We're not told that we are sexual by nature. And so the distortions that we carry around all of our views around sexuality live in our bodies. And so I believe when we move towards seeking the sacred within our sexuality, we need to heal our bodies.
Yes, absolutely. But there was also something that you talked about that I think empathetically could help other people heal along these lines. And you talked about one of the things that you really had to work on in your work towards being a priestess of the goddess was body image and understanding. Sure. Can you elaborate on that just a titch?
I think every woman out there understands how, her body and how it's projected as a sexual object and looked at, judged all the time. If she's not measuring up, then she feels less than. And I know I've carried a heavy body in this lifetime and never felt that I was sexually good enough, sexually acceptable. And that's a bit of a tough line to walk when I felt sexual. I've been a sexual being all of my life. From a very young age, I felt very sexual. And so, the messages that we receive from our parents and all of those things are, you're not allowed to be sexual. That's not a good thing. That's how I was brought up anyway. And, that's growing up in the 60s because I'm in my 50s now. So the messages children are receiving today are different. But knowing that I had sexual energy in my body, I felt that I was inadequate, I wasn't good enough, I wasn't sexy, all of those things, they trap you.
So what was your pathway to peace with that?
Look, it's only really quite recent that I've come to terms with my body, and that would not have been until my 40s when I started to gain some ability to be reflective around the dysmorphia that we view ourselves with. compared to what really is real. And I started to gain a sense of self-worth. I started to see myself as other than just my body, than just my image of what was projected out there and what was being projected at me, because those messages are very clear. When you don't feel good about your body, you attract everything back to you that proves to you that you don't feel good about your body. Mm-hmm. And so I've walked with that, and so many women out there will understand exactly what I'm talking about. It's not until I gained some maturity and I got a bit older that I was able to see that I was more than just my body, that I was all of these other things, my mind and my humor and all of those things.
So all of those, recognizing all of those things within yourself,
yes,
aided you in coming to really embrace your body as well, is what you're saying.
Absolutely. It's part of a package. It's part of a whole. And to where I'm sitting now and how I view my body, I'm still no skinny mini, that's for sure. And I would not conform at all to ordinary standards of what people project onto a woman today to be a sexual being. But my God, I have so much more to offer than just that. And in terms of my sexuality, yeah.
And including that. That's the thing, is it doesn't, that recognizing the other aspects embraces the physical aspect as well, doesn't exclude that.
No, not at all. But in embracing the whole, the sum of the parts that make up the whole, then I have been able to get past just this one aspect of me that is perceived a certain way, or that I perceived a certain way more than anything, because I was the one that felt I wasn't good enough. But once I've gotten over myself, so girls, get over yourself, for God's sake, Goddess sake, and see what else you bring to the table. And as soon as you can get past just what your body looks like and bring your humor, bring your exciting self to the party, the rest actually falls away, because you know what you project out there is what you get back. So when you're bringing this beautiful person in a whole sense, you get the messages that come back to you that see you in a different light. And so you have a different experience. It really is that simple, or difficult, as you choose.
And we are going to take a break for a moment. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Kerri, Priestess of the Goddess, about ecstasy.
Ooh!
Footsteps and their echoes, and I read every page, and it said all the things it should say, but I still doubt your ways in this hell, so I'll hold my own place. Father, he told me so, but it was so damn long ago. He said sometimes the rain it falls, but sometimes
That was a band called AKW, and we are fortunate enough to have them coming in and playing live in studio next week. Very cool. Once again, the band is named AKW. Looking forward to having you guys on. Thank you very much. Tonight, we have Kerri with us. She is a priestess of the goddess, and she is here from Brisbane, Australia, to honor us with her insight and her wisdom about sacred sexuality. Before we went away, I teased that we were going to talk about ecstasy. When I say ecstasy, I'm not talking about drugs, people. I'm talking about the true kind of ecstasy, the kind that just emanates, screams from your entire being. So, Kerri, what's your definition of ecstasy?
Look, I've researched into ecstasy, and the area that I actually looked at was the Sundance rituals of the Plains Indians, because the dancing that they did moves them into states of ecstasy. And I used it as an analogy to draw between what ravers do at a dance party by taking eckies and to move into states of ecstasy and then dancing all night. I use dance as an analogy to draw between these two states. But look, ecstasy is something that, again, every culture has tried to achieve throughout time, because in states of ecstasy they can access the numinous, the divine. They are able to make a connection with spirit, and that's really what ecstasy has been about for so many years. I mean, shamans of all different cultures move into states of ecstasy so that they can create magical outcomes and work with the energy to shift things at times. And so, yes.
So that's the result of ecstasy. Mm-hmm. But what is ecstasy?
Ecstasy is actually a state that happens within the body that moves between hypertropic and tropotropic or something. I can't think of the words now. But it's actually a measurable state that's activated within the body. Mm-hmm. That's the use of breath moves the body into states of ecstasy, as well as repeated dancing. And, sex is obviously a way to move into states of ecstasy. Pain is also another way to move into states of ecstasy. Mm. And so these various tools have been employed in different ways to move people into these altered states of consciousness. So that's really what I'm talking about in terms of ecstasy.
And then that leads us to sacred sexual ecstasy.
Yes, states of ecstasy where the body is so filled up with energy through the act of sex mm-hmm. and breath, because what we're doing is rising energy states through the body, moving them through the base chakra and up to the heart and then out through the crown. And that happens with the kundalini that becomes activated, and many religions have used that.
Slow down and do that one more time just so everybody could follow the pathway, if you would, the road.
Okay. Well, kundalini is one of the basic tools that has been used by the Buddhist and Taoist religions to activate energy utilized through sex. And it can be activated without sexual activity, of course, as well. But through sex, we can activate the kundalini energy. And for those that don't know what that is, the kundalini is a term used in Buddhist philosophy to describe the energy that is wrapped around the sacrum in the body. And when activated through breath or through yoga or through dance and sex, you can start to raise this energy up through the body. And in raising it, we start to activate the energy centers of the body. Mm-hmm. So in sexual ecstasy, what we're really doing is filling the body as a vessel with energy activated through sex, the actual intercourse aspects of it, but also the energetic sharing with a partner. And that happens through sex in various aspects of arousal, whether that's through kissing, through stimulation of other parts of the body. You saw me grab my breast. So I was thinking of my breast. Yes, so activating the body sexually is filling it with energy. And these then elevate the whole of the body to states of ecstasy. Mm-hmm. And it is from this place that we've got a lift-off point that we can move into altered states of consciousness. And in these altered states of consciousness, I find, for me, speaking personally, with an activated kundalini that has been raised up from the base chakra, moving up through the other chakras, up to the heart, it just opens the heart and activates amazing amounts of love energy so that you're filled with euphoric feelings, and the heart energy is a key. I mean, sacred sex is about love. It really is about love. Love for your partner, love for yourself, love for the divine. For me, as a priestess, I have a love for the goddess, and I use her as the basis for all of my teachings and the work that I do, and a reference point. And what I'm just thinking to say here at the moment too is that in the ancient goddess religions, the rituals that happened in the temples were about the body of the priestess being used as a vessel for the energy of the goddess to enter.
And that's exactly where I was going to lead you to, because it seems like a natural progression. Please make the distinction between a sacred prostitute and what we in Western culture look at prostitutes as today.
A profane sexual prostitute. The term sacred prostitute was coined by male academics last century, when they were researching and finding archaeological evidence of the various goddess temples back through history in different cultures. And what they referred to was the cultic sexual practices that they identified that were happening and taking place in the goddess temples. As male academics at that point, they had no point of reference. There was no women's studies back then to bring through another viewpoint around what was going on. And with a Christian ideology around sexuality, all that they could see was that these women were having sex, and so therefore it must be some sort of sex cult that was going on. And so what they did was term these activities and the rituals that were taking place, which were sacred sexual rituals in which the energy of the goddess would enter into the priestess's body, and the men that came to have sex with them at the temples were having this amazing experience of expanded energetic sex with a priestess who was channeling the goddess. That's what their bodies were. They were vessels filled with divine energy. And so they were able to utilize that energy to have profound, even prophetic experiences of the energy of the goddess. So the academics at that time called this sex cults that were happening. And so the phrase, the term was coined sacred prostitutes, because it was happening within a temple space, but it was sex. And so that is an entirely different act to a prostitute. Of course, they were being paid. The temples, don't you forget, they needed to be funded, and men would pay lots and lots of money to come to a temple and have sex with a sacred prostitute. It was often done within the ritual context of high rituals done on a yearly basis, annual rituals around Heros, Gamos, things like that, which I might explain later. But
how about now?
How about now? Okay. Hieros is a word that speaks, a term coined by the Greeks, which talks about the sacred marriage. And so the sacred marriage were rituals that were done, they were fertility rites, and they were done again through many cultures, down through various eras. And so these rituals were so important that they would go on for weeks at a time. And specifically, the one I researched for my studies was in Inanna, in the temples in Mesopotamia, and we're talking about 4000 BCE. And these fertility rites would happen publicly, and they were week-long festivals where people would come. It was party on. And they were public rites where the high priestess of the temple would make love with the monarch or the king or the vegetation god of the land. And this was to ensure the fertility of the crops for the coming season. Everything was based around fertility. And a lot of my message to women today is that pre the era we know now around sexuality, where it's such a very limited viewpoints that we have around sexuality, in the days of the goddess in the temple era, sexuality was everything, because if life didn't continue, we did not continue. Life died out. There was no procreation.
So you just started to go in a direction that I'd like to go anyway.
Okay.
Which is, if there is one message, one thing that you'd like to impart or share with the men and the women about sexuality, sensuality, something that maybe you feel like, okay, you know what, this could help you in your everyday life, what would that be?
It would be that women's bodies were once revered as the most sacred aspect of life. Women's bodies brought forth new life. And that happened through the act of sexuality. Sexuality was so revered. It was so honoured. The goddess honoured all acts of sexuality, however they were performed. The Kadishtu, which was a name given to the high priestesses of the temple, obviously they were at the top end of the scale, and they were revered. They were at the top echelon of the sexual act being performed in ritual context with the monarch of the land. And in fact, in some instances, the goddess actually chose who the monarch of the land would be. And it was certainly not a patriarchal society. It was a matriarchal societies that chose who the man would be that would service the goddess or service the priestess, because everybody saw that women's bodies brought forth new life, and the creation act was an aspect reflected everywhere, from the crops being grown to the animals being born. Fertility was life. It was revered, it was honoured. And what I want to say to women today is that women's bodies in so many contexts were sacred. And that's what I want to bring back to this day. Women's bodies are still sacred. We still birth new life through our bodies, and we seem to have forgotten how amazing that is. And sex is the way that happens. And so looking at sex from an ancient context, it was sacred, and it needs to be viewed that way again. And women need to see their bodies as these sacred vessels to bring through life.
And is there anything that you could say or do to help them recognize how sacred their bodies, their beings are?
I think they need to get out of their heads and start to see their bodies for the amazing gifts that they are, and stop listening to the rubbish. I nearly swore then.
Thank you for not.
The rubbish that is projected at them about what it means to be sacred and sexual, and start to seek out those men and people within their lives that will reflect back to them the ideas that reveal just that they are sacred.
Well, and as far as I'm concerned, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it's not just about seeing it in the reflection of men.
Yes.
It's also other women,
Yes.
and it's also, most importantly, in the mirror. When
Indeed.
and I don't mean in the mirror by looking at their physicality. I mean looking at their entire being and appreciating, respecting, honoring the divinity. And that's what I've been talking about for a long time for both men and women. It's about
Absolutely.
respecting and honoring and celebrating how incredibly wonderful we are.
I totally agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, I want women to know that sex was the most honoured and common act performed, and that their bodies were these amazing gifts, and they need to see them again that way, to love themselves for the gifts that they bring, just to be. I mean, we are now shifting into a different way of looking at women and the power that they now hold within our current society, in Western society anyway, being freed to bring the gifts that they have to the party in all sorts of areas and structures of our society, whether they be politics or whether they are within the ownership or, the management of companies and corporations. Women are here to rebalance the scale that has swung very far out into a patriarchal sense, and that will help us all to be healing. Not only women, but men as well. Men need to embrace the feminine in their own bodies, because we know that we are both male and female energies within each of us. No matter what bodies we are walking in, we carry both feminine and masculine energies. And we need to find a balance within that, within our own bodies as well.
That was gorgeous. And as I always forewarn people, this hour has flown by.
Really?
Yes. So if people would like to get a hold of you to ask you more questions about sex, sexuality, sacredness, the priestess, or attend a workshop, how would they go about doing that?
The best way to get me really is on my Facebook page, which is very popular. So that's the Goddess of Sacred Sex on Facebook. You can find me. My website is goddessofsacredsex.com, and there's information there on how to contact me directly. I'd like to say too that I do readings. If you would like to have a channeled reading with me, I bring through the goddess and I can answer your questions on sexuality. You can find me on my Facebook page or on my web page. And I'd really like to promote a sacred sexual sacred sex toy that I promote on my page, which is a beautiful quartz crystal dildo that I really believe is a wonderful tool to promote the connection of a woman back to her body. The properties of crystals are programmable, and they are able to connect you back to your energies rather than using them as a toy, a masturbatory tool just to bring you to orgasm. They have other properties which you can read about online, and I really promote them and think they are a wonderful tool for women connecting back to their own sexuality.
Excellent. And one more time, if they want to get a hold of you, Facebook and your webpage is what?
Goddessofsacredsex.com.
Kerri, it's been a true honor. I do appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Greg. Tal.
So if you've listened in, you know that if you have any more questions and I wasn't able to get you, please feel free to email me at greg@gregfriedman.com. Also, please check out and like my Facebook page, Inner Journey with Greg Friedman. I am incredibly fortunate to have Danny Donaire as my production assistant. He's an author in his own right. Please check out his book, 7 Years and 7 Days, A Life of Now. It's excellent. And you could check him out on Facebook as well. That's Danny Donaire. Donaire is spelled Donayre. As always, I lead with and I finish with gratitude. I can't begin to thank all of you enough. As I've said, the show doesn't exist without your participation. For that and so much more, I am hugely grateful. You've been listening to Inner Journey with Greg Friedman. Have a lovely evening.
love-struck Romeo, sing the streets a serenade, laying everybody low with a love song that he made. Find the streetlight, steps out of the shade, says something like,